Hello, this is The Gaze, and you are welcome to the News Digest. Today in the episode, this week in strikes on Russian facilities, a lot to remember. The season of critical infrastructure strikes has started. Russia versus Ukraine. Hidden assets of the Kremlin. Who allowed Russia to break the international order? And we start our today's weekly episode by a compilation of this week's Ukrainian successful energy sanctions against Russian oil plants and weapons sanctions against the targeted weapons facilities. A combined heat and power plant in Russia's Bryansk region became a target. Russian telegram channels report a missile strike that partially halted the operation of local energy infrastructure. Eyewitnesses said a large fire broke out at the site of impact. Also, Belgorod's thermal power plant Luch, Ray in English, lived up to its name only briefly. 3 flashes followed by pitch-black darkness. According to preliminary reports, a strike hit the gas turbine power substation. As a result, parts of the city and surrounding areas were left without power, and water supply disruptions were also reported. Just like Russia tried to exhaust Ukrainian civilian population with energy and water shortages, Russian civilian population will face the same conditions as military targets, usually have combined meaning, and they serve the needs of both the military and civilians in Russia.
Russia must clearly know that civilized countries differ from the wild by the fact that they never start first and are not aggressors. But that does not mean they are weak, and one should not show weakness. If they threaten a blackout, for example, of the capital of Ukraine, then in the Kremlin they should know that there will be a blackout in the capital of Russia.
In the Russian city of Dzerzhinsk, a fire broke out following airstrikes. Local sources reported that the Sverdlov plant, part of Russia's military-industrial complex, was damaged. The facility is one of the country's largest producers of industrial explosives. At least 30% of its output goes to the military in particular. Another 30% is explosive materials in general. 35% is industrial chemicals, and the remaining 5% is machinery manufacturing. During the night of October 6th, Ukrainian drones also attacked Russian-occupied Crimea. It was particularly loud in Feodosia, where a major oil depot, the Feodosia Oil Transshipment Terminal, was targeted, damaging fuel storage tanks. The terminal has been targeted many times before, as it supplies fuel to Russian military units stationed in Crimea and all along the southern front. Not all is good in Putin's kingdom. Factories ablaze, power outages in big cities, and even own missiles meant to stop Ukrainian drones are hitting Russian homes instead. Ukrainian drones keep causing mounting problems. The pressure starts to kick in seriously for Russia's energy and military sectors of economy, which is especially hard for a country that simply has no other sectors of economy. On Tuesday, October 7th, a fire broke out at the Ural turbine plant in the Russian city of Yekaterinburg. The official cause of the fire has not been disclosed, as usual. The plant is a significant facility for Russia, as it is producing equipment not only for civilian purposes, such as for thermal power plants, hydroelectric stations, and industrial energy systems, but also for the Russian military. This means it is directly connected to supplying power for the production of missiles, drones, and other military-related equipment. The energy turbines manufactured there were used to power such military facilities. While Russia's weapons production often draws attention to something big, like missile factories and tank repair plants, far less is said about the small but crucial facilities that keep the defense industry afloat. One of such is the Novosibirsk solder plant, a manufacturer whose products quietly underpin the Russian military's ability to produce electronics, drones, and precision weaponry. A major fire after a possible missile strike or inside explosion has been reported at the premises of this plant, known for its work in several key sectors, including production of electronics and microchips, repair and assembly of electrical equipment, defense industry operations, including soldering components for weapons, communications, and radio-electronic systems. So we can state that over the last week, such targets on the territory of Russia were hit. Industrial sites of the military production sector, Oil processing plants, which supplied most of the gasoline of Russian production to the fueling stations, power plants and power transformers in the frontline regions to disrupt Russian logistics deep in the rear. A resultive week, all that remains on our side is to watch and analyze the efficiency of these strikes in the long run. The Ukrainian Defense Forces counteroffensive operation in Dobropillia continues. According to Commander-in-Chief of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, Oleksandr Syrskyi, he visited the positions and spoke with commanders. According to the Commander-in-Chief, the Ukrainian Armed Forces are identifying and eliminating saboteurs and groups of Russian occupiers who have been encircled.
In total, 180.8 square kilometers of Donbas territory were liberated during the operation, and nearly 213 square kilometers were cleared of saboteurs. I have identified the problematic issues and needs of our offensive group and issued the necessary instructions. Counter-sabotage operations will continue. The defense will remain active. Measures are also being taken to prevent the enemy's advance in the Pokrovsk direction, improve logistics and protect roads and critical infrastructure. Oleksandr Syrskyi, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, on Telegram.
The Kremlin leader will have to lose 1 million troops to seize eastern Ukraine. This was stated by President Volodymyr Zelensky during a meeting with journalists. The Ukrainian leader also said that dialogue is currently underway between Kyiv and Washington at various levels, including at the intelligence and military levels. The U.S. president also realized that Putin had lied to him.
Trump understands that everything Putin sold him in Alaska as supposed Russian military capabilities doesn't actually work. This means he was trying to sell him low-quality goods. I think anyone would be insulted by being lied to. What happened is what I told him. The Russians won't take the East. And if they want to do so, Putin will have to bury 1 million of his people, because we understood how many he had already buried, taking 30% of our east since the start of the full-scale war, and we predict what he will have to do to try to take all of Donbas. Volodymyr Zelensky, president of Ukraine, during a press meeting.
More than 85% of Russian targets on the front lines are hit by drones. According to Oleksandr Kamyshin, advisor to the President of Ukraine on strategic issues, he noted that over 2 million drones were produced in Ukraine last year. Ukrainian long-range drones are striking Russian territory, effectively bringing the war back to Russian soil. According to Kamyshin, only 2 countries, Ukraine and Russia, are currently capable of effectively using UAVs. He also warned that Moscow could attempt a large-scale drone attack on European countries in the future, so the continent must be prepared.
Last year, more than 2.2 million drones were manufactured in Ukraine. Currently, over 85% of all frontline targets are hit by drones. Ukrainian long-range attack drones have set Russia ablaze and helped bring the war back to enemy territory. Believe me, one day Russia could launch a large-scale drone attack on Europe. We must be prepared for that moment. Oleksandr Kamyshin, advisor to the President of Ukraine on strategic issues, during the 3rd International Defense Industries Forum.
The first train from Pyongyang carrying A95 gasoline arrived at the Vladivostok 1 railway station. The fuel from North Korea was sent to Russia as humanitarian aid to help the country cope with the consequences of the failure of one refinery after another. According to Syrskyi, spokesman for the Ukrainian Volunteer Army, China had previously promised to help Russia overcome the fuel crisis, and not for free. And the longer the war against Ukraine continues, the worse the gasoline situation in Russia will become. The fuel shortage in Russia has reached 20%. This is how Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky commented on the success of the Ukrainian Armed Forces' long-range strikes deep into Russian territory. The Ukrainian leader emphasized that even cities like Ust-Luga and Primorsk are already within reach of Ukrainian attacks. Russia launched a combined missile and drone strike on Kyiv overnight, leaving parts of the capital without electricity and causing disruptions to the water supply. New Voice of Ukraine publishes a photo report showing the aftermath of the latest attack on Ukraine's capital. According to Kyiv Mayor Vitaly Klitschko, at least 12 people were injured, with 8 hospitalized as of Friday morning. In different districts, debris from a downed drone hit a multi-story residential building, igniting apartments on several floors. The facade and windows of a 10-story building were damaged, and a car caught fire in the courtyard. Debris from intercepted missiles also fell on open areas of the left bank districts, damaging nearby facilities. As a result of strikes targeting critical infrastructure, Kyiv's left bank was left without power overnight. In the morning, Ukrenergo reported that emergency blackouts had been introduced in the capital and 9 other regions. Energy workers continue restoring the power grid, promising that shutdowns will be lifted once the system stabilizes. President Volodymyr Zelensky said that Russian forces launched over 450 drones and more than 30 missiles overnight, targeting everything that makes life normal. Russia also carried out massive strikes on Dnipropetrovsk region, sparking fires at energy facilities and injuring 3 people in Kryvyi Rih. Damage was also reported in Zaporizhia, Cherkasy, and Poltava regions.
Elimination of the consequences of the Russian attack on the energy sector continues at many critical infrastructure facilities. A cynical and calculated attack, over 450 drones and more than 3 dozen missiles against everything that ensures normal life and what the Russians want to deprive us of. As of now, more than 20 people are known to have been injured across the country. All are being provided with the necessary assistance. Unfortunately, a child died in Zaporizhia as a result of the attack. My sincere condolences to his family and friends. Volodymyr Zelensky, President of Ukraine, on Telegram.
Both the drones and the missiles that Russia used to hit Ukraine are not Russian. Shahed drones are licensed by Iran, and the ballistics are of North Korean origin. So we come to the question, does Russia have a deficit of those weapons of domestic production? And should the U.S. take advantage of this and quickly supply Ukraine with Tomahawk missiles? We asked the military expert Vladislav Seleznyov for his opinion on the matter.
I think the issue is that the Russians have access to relatively cheap resources, which are supplied both from North Korea and from the Islamic Republic of Iran. I don't think the Russians have completely exhausted their ability to produce their own ballistic missiles. But it seems that right now the Russians are in the process of stockpiling the necessary missile weaponry to continue carrying out missile and drone terror against our country. What do we need to understand? Of course, 1, 2, 3, or even a dozen Tomahawks won't fundamentally change the situation. But if we're talking about the supply of several dozen, or maybe even hundreds of these missiles, that would be a significant argument, especially at the negotiating table. Because the only factor Putin recognizes today is the factor of force. If the Ukrainian military is strengthened with such a powerful missile component in addition to the missiles and drones currently produced by the Ukrainian defense industry, this will undoubtedly significantly bolster our negotiating position and will quite likely force Putin to make certain concessions.
As these strikes continue, as part of Russia's criminal aggression, we remember those who allowed Putin to unfold his aggression and overall to deprive the world of the rules-based order by constantly breaking it and creating obstacles for international organizations to act, up until making them completely useless. The UN, OSCE, IAE, they can do nothing with Putin occupying the largest European nuclear power plant, attacking several countries in wars of aggression, spreading violence, and even sending drones against the European airspace. All of this is the result of the gradual process that started long ago, and several world leaders of that time did nothing to stop Putin for real. Angela Merkel and Barack Obama. So Angela Merkel is now blaming Poland and the Baltic states for Russia's invasion of Ukraine. She's doing this while promoting her new book, posing for photos with Viktor Orban, and insisting that he was never a Russian Trojan horse. In short, Merkel is trying to rewrite her deeply damaging legacy. But let's talk about her real legacy, the one Europe is still paying for today. Aside from Vladimir Putin, Merkel is arguably one of the figures most responsible for enabling the Russian invasion of Ukraine. She blocked both Ukraine and Georgia from joining NATO and the EU, shrugged off Russia's aggression in both countries, and doubled down on dependence on Russian gas, building Nord Stream while Eastern European nations warned exactly where it would lead. Merkel dismissed their warnings as exaggerations. She clung to the illusion of change through trade, a cornerstone of German foreign policy for decades. But instead of moderating Russia, this policy made the Kremlin richer, bolder, and more militarized. The EU's political culture, molded by Merkel's influence, avoids hyperbole even as the obvious unfolds. Russian drones striking Ukraine, Lavrov openly declaring war on the West, yet European leaders still insist, no, 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 we're not at war. Merkel says she feels she's being unfairly blamed for Russia's war in Ukraine because of her position at the 2008 NATO summit, where she opposed granting Ukraine a membership action plan. In an interview with Der Spiegel, marking the release of her memoir, Merkel confirmed that this perception is not just a feeling, but a fact. President Volodymyr Zelensky, for example, called on former French President Nicolas Sarkozy and me to visit Bucha after the horrific massacre, clearly implying that our position in Bucharest bore some responsibility for the deaths there, Merkel said. When asked why she didn't act more decisively if she understood Putin's ambitions so clearly, Merkel replied that she did draw conclusions. Responding to criticism that she failed to effectively deter Putin, didn't bolster Germany's defense capabilities, withheld arms from Ukraine, and left Germany dependent on Russian gas, Merkel said that many important facts are being forgotten. For instance, she added, both Ukraine and Poland were not fundamentally opposed to the import of Russian gas through their territories, as they benefited financially from it. Merkel also said she believes that in the early years of his presidency, Vladimir Putin had no intention of attacking Ukraine, but that his plans evolved over time, partly in reaction to the West's behavior. So she basically reproduced one of the key Russian propaganda theses, that Russian aggression against Ukraine is the fault of Europe and not Russia itself. Polish Foreign Minister Radoslaw Syrskyi has responded to Merkel's recent interview, in which she claimed that Poland and the Baltic states did not support the EU's policy toward Russia. Syrskyi dismissed Merkel's version of events, saying it was as true as what she wrote in her memoirs, that no one from Central Europe protested against Nord Stream.
Just look at how the German government reacted in 2007 when I said we didn't like deals being made over our heads, so apparently the Chancellor forgot how her own government responded to our protests. Radosław Syrskyi, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Poland, during a press conference.
In the conversation with a Hungarian journalist, available on YouTube, Merkel said that by June 2021, she had the impression that Putin no longer took the Minsk agreements seriously. She explained that she and Macron wanted to create a new format to allow the EU to engage directly with Putin, but not everyone supported this idea, mainly the Baltic states and Poland, who feared there was no unified EU policy toward Russia. In response to the growing controversy, Merkel's office stated that her remarks speak for themselves and are nothing new. Nothing new indeed. And another leader of the Western country, Barack Obama, has let Putin annex Crimea and invade Ukrainian Donbass with impunity. So no serious sanctions were imposed on Russia for the war. The U.S. then president often met with Vladimir Putin. The Nord Stream 2 pipeline was finished, and as the result, Mr. Obama got a Nobel Peace Prize in 2009 for great efforts to reinforce international diplomacy, and in 2014. The entire system of the rules-based order in Europe collapsed when Putin got what he wanted, a piece of Ukraine that served as a bridgehead for the future 2022 invasion. But more has been done already by the now President of the United States, Donald Trump. He has been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize for brokering a ceasefire agreement between Iran and Israel. The nomination was formally submitted by Republican Congressman Buddy Carter from Georgia, who said Trump played an extraordinary historic role in ending the 12-day war between the two nations. But in the end, this year's prize was given to Maria Corina Machado, leader of the Venezuelan opposition. She stands against Maduro's authoritarian regime and for freedom of speech. We can only wish for the prize to be given to President Trump next year for making Russia stop their war of aggression against Ukraine, for example. That way, nobody will have any doubt who's earned the prize. Thank you for standing with Ukraine. Please subscribe so as to stay tuned to what is happening in the world, shown from Ukrainian perspective. Goodbye.